Ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to introduce Lisa Morton. She is a Halloween expert she's also a nonfiction writer. Is that right, Lisa? You've written a lot of nonfiction books, but not much fiction.
I actually have written quite a lot of fiction, but mainly short stories. I've published over 200 short stories.
Really? Well, what do you think about Edgar Allan Poe?
Well, he's the man.
The Telltale Heart. I remember in high school when my teacher read it to us, and I think I was in like even not very young. I was like in the 11th grade, and she read that Telltale Heart, and man, it was so good.
it's a great story, and Poe's story, The Black Cat, has become a Halloween classic over the century.
Well, what made him what was behind Edgar Allan Poe? Do you know much about him?
I know some about him. I'm not nearly the specialist that some of my friends are, but he obviously was a very bright man. He was also a critic and a scholar, but he had some issues, I think we can safely say, and he worked those out in his fiction. And here we are 150 years later, still terrified by these stories.
Yeah, and talking about Edgar Allan Poe. So Lisa may be one of the world's greatest experts on Halloween, and we were just kind of kibitzing about things that we would like, subjects we'd like to talk about, and we do a lot of like really serious stuff, like what's happening in the world, and I also like to do some fun things, Lisa. It's not all about everything serious. We got to have a little fun at the same time. So, how did you get so interested in Halloween? How did that start?
I always loved it as a kid. It was my favorite night of the year, I think, because you got to be another character. You got to dress up and you'd go out with your friends. I was back in the age when parents didn't go with us. Um,
Yeah.
and that was kind of
Yes.
magical for one night.
Yeah. That was exactly right. Yes. I could remember going with my friends and it rained. And I remember the bag that I was carrying all of my candy in. All the candy fell out on the road, and oh, it was just. But we figured it out, right? We figured it out. There was no mom and dad there. It was just us kids, and we figured it out. How did Halloween get started? What's the background on all this?
Well, going way back, the great grandmama of Halloween is an Irish Celtic celebration called Samhain. And by the way, if you see that spelled out, you'll think it's pronounced Samhain. And there have been a lot of characters in horror movies and novels named Samhain, but it's pronounced Samhain. It was their New Year's festival. It was that time of the year when they were moving into their long, cold winter and they were kind of hunkering down. And they thought it was a time of borders. So the border between our world and this very scary other world that they believed in was very thin on that night. And these horrible things they believed in called the she could cross over and wreak all kinds of terrible havoc. And they would tell stories about these things, which would be crossing over and burning down their
Sort
palaces.
of like the portal in Narnia, which we'll get to before you leave. I want to ask you about Narnia. So coming through the portal is what they thought, huh?
Exactly right. And that's where Halloween gets its macabre side. When the Catholic missionaries came into Ireland and started to work on converting these people, they were way more successful with co-opting these existing celebrations and temples and so forth, rather than trying to stamp them out. And so they moved the date of their saint celebration. It was originally May 13th. They moved it to November 1st. And back then, they would start the celebration at sundown on the night before. So that's where we get the sun goes down October 31st. It's Halloween night.
It's so interesting that you say that because I was talking to a friend of mine who's kind of helped me with this Substack project, and he was saying that they celebrate in their church a day to celebrate the saints. And he said that it was interesting to him how there was this issue of religion and faith connected to Halloween. So that's not unusual. I never heard of it before. Tell us about that.
Well, they many of our existing holidays come from that idea of co-opting these old things that had been around for centuries at that point. And what a lot of people don't know is what the name Halloween means. Hollow is an old name for saints. So the saints are built right into that name, Halloween. And All Saints' Day, which was November 1st, was celebrated with things like you would go to maybe Mass, you would go to the graveyard, you would clean the graves and the headstones of your loved ones who had passed away. And it was a very somber kind of thing. And in fact, is still observed in many places around the world that way.
That's really so. Has it? We kind of think of Halloween. I do, at least, as sort of a U.S. thing, but it really is not. Is that right?
Well, the ways we celebrate it now are almost all very American in origin. Things like haunted attractions, trick or treat, these things all originated here in America. So we may have that ancient, like 2,000-year-old Celtic background, but in many respects, Halloween is strictly American in origin.
Oh, really? So they don't do this in France then?
Oh, especially not in France. That is one of the few places in Europe that hasn't really embraced Halloween. It has spread around the globe like crazy over the last 20 years. When I was first researching it, my first Halloween book was called The Halloween Encyclopedia, and I started working on that in around 2001. There was no celebration of it outside of North America. Now it is everywhere. And it is a massively successful export for the US, I think. And people all over the world now love trick or treat and costuming and candy. And
Yeah. How did that happen? How did we go from, the origins of it to where now it's like trick or treat? I mean, who doesn't love trick or treat, right? Everybody loves it. So tell us, or we just had a bunch of kids over. My wife and I had a bunch of, and my daughter was there as well, and carved pumpkins. And the kids had a great time. Does that connect? That's obviously connected because you carve pumpkins around Halloween, right?
yeah, pumpkins date back to a very old folk tale that's found all over the world in some form or other. It's the legend of Stingy Jack. And Stingy Jack was a really bad character. This was a guy who gambled and drank, and he tricked the devil out of taking his soul 3 times. So when he finally dies, heaven obviously doesn't want this guy, but the devil's mad at him and won't let him into hell. The devil ends up throwing him just this one little burning hell ember. Jack puts that into a carved out gourd and uses that to light his way around the world. So in Ireland and Scotland, they would carve these big turnips into these faces that were supposed to be Jack the trickster. And then, of course, when they came to this country, mainly in the 1840s to escape famine, they found our gorgeous pumpkins. Those were way better than the turnips. And that is where we get the jack-o'-lantern.
Well, are they still doing this over in Ireland?
There are places that still carve the turnips, and then there's a very particular kind of gourd there that they carve in certain regions. I think these things are much harder to carve than pumpkins too.
Lisa, why has this grown? What's behind the really almost fantastic growth of Halloween? What's behind it?
It is growing every year more and more. This year is expected to be the biggest Halloween ever in terms of retail sales. And I think we love Halloween for the same reason that we love horror movies or haunted attractions, because it gives us a chance to explore our fears, but in a really playful way. So, you go through a haunted house, say, and you come out on the other end, and maybe you were scared and screaming inside, but when you come out, you think, well, I survived that. I'm actually pretty strong. So I think it gives us a chance to explore that in a creative and playful way. We love the creativity of it, dressing in costumes. Me, I do a big yard haunt that's like a little Almost a little work of art for us. We put a lot of time into it, and it's really fun. And it kind of even brings communities together in a way that I think even Christmas doesn't.
Well, we're going to get to that, but I wanted to know, why is it that we so much like dressing up? So let's start with kids. Why do now we're going to have a Halloween parade at the bottom of our street coming up, and it's funny because they're saying bring the candy up. Well, it used to be the kids have to go to your house. You don't take the candy to them. But I guess everything is changing, Lisa. But why do kids love dressing up so much? And I remember as a kid loving to dress up. What's behind that?
Well, I'm glad you asked this because this is one of the misconceptions that I hear quoted most often, which is that costuming, dressing up goes back to the ancient Celts or back to early Ireland. It does not. It is very recent. It is American in origin. And what you need to know is that back about 120 years or so ago, Halloween was mainly celebrated by prank playing kids. There was no trick or treat yet. Halloween would be a bunch of mainly boys, sometimes girls. They would go out and they would play at the beginning fairly innocent pranks. They might, knock on your window or tip over your outhouse, that kind of thing. But America was getting bigger and more urbanized at the same time. These kids moved into the cities and these pranks got really destructive. These kids were setting fires and smashing windows, and so by the early 1930s, there were a lot of cities thinking about banning Halloween because it was just so out of hand. But some of them were smarter and thought maybe we can buy these kids off instead. People at the time loved to costume for everything. There were costumed Thanksgiving and Christmas traditions. So it made sense to give these kids costumes for Halloween. I thought you might like to see this. This is a book from 1937 that was put out in Minneapolis. And this book tells homeowners how to buy these kids off. And it does not have trick or treat in here, but it has something that's like an early version of it called house to house parties, with the idea being that one house would give the kids a simple costume, one would give them a game, one would give them a treat. And that kind of thing ended up becoming trick or treat. The whole thing doesn't really go national until about 1939, which is when we start to see it pop up in the major American magazines.
That's so you still haven't said why the kids love to dress up. What's behind that? And let's bring the adults in. Why do adults like to do this? What gets them so excited and interested? It's and do we lose our interest as we get older?
I think that depends on the person. I mean, cosplay is certainly an adult variation on trick or treat costuming, and adults love cosplay, and adults love dressing up at Halloween too. I think we like that idea that we get to be somebody else for
Yeah.
one night, that we get to explore another personality, another headset. So kids certainly love it too, because I think with kids, there's in particular that element of maybe empowerment. I get to be a superhero. I get to be a really strong a fireman or whatever for this
Yeah.
night. And it also has that fun element of mystery where maybe even your friends don't know who you are.
Yeah, that one's always fun. So, now when we think about the costumes today, does that come from, for Lisa, is that just all the kind of the social moment, or how do the people that make the costumes, how do they know what to make?
That's a great question. And sometimes you see them blowing it a little bit. I know there were a few years where they were already mass producing certain like political figures, and then that person wouldn't advance and they'd be stuck with these masks that they couldn't sell. But one of the things that they missed big time was Barbie. Nobody saw the massive success of Barbie coming in advance the year it was released. And by next year, of course, Barbie costumes were everywhere, but that was one that they missed. So they just kind of are basing it on trends, on sometimes I think they base it sheerly on what licenses they can afford to buy. So suddenly you'll see a lot of costumes from a show that you think, is that show really that popular?
What about throwbacks? I mean, do we have sort of your standard? I mean, you got skeletons, right? I mean, people will. What are the standard costumes that are out there that you say they've been doing this for 50 years? Which ones would you point to?
Um, I certainly classic monsters are still big. It's interesting to see like the universal depiction of Frankenstein still showing up, the green skin, the flat head, the bolts. And the witch, of course, is always popular. The jack-o'-lantern with the big pumpkin mask is always popular. And one of the things I noticed in the retailing trends this year was there was a big like retro vibe going on in a lot of the major retailers. So it seems like nostalgia is really big this year, and a lot of the costumes look like those things we grew up with as kids in the 50s and 60s and 70s.
Well, what would those be? What would they be? I'll keep
Well,
my eyes
they
open for them.
Yeah, for example, I saw one at Target that was a wolf man, and the reason it looked retro was it had kind of the cartoony face and the really bright colors. It was not even, remotely realistic looking. It looked kind of like a cartoon, and it had the shiny costume with the like picture of the wolf man growling on the front. And I think it definitely was aimed at appealing to maybe baby boomers who remember dressing up in similar things when they were kids.
I would think, Lisa, that when you think about Halloween, and one of my daughters, it's her favorite time. She's so excited because she can do it this year, and she's 25 years old, but she loves it, and my wife loves it. It seems like Halloween is a happy time. Has it always been a happy time, or has that changed over the years?
I think it is always been somewhat happy. The only time it would not have been a really happy thing would have been in the 30s when there was a lot of destructive prank playing going
Right,
on.
right.
That would have been a very anxious time, I think, for Halloween, especially if you were a city official trying to figure out how to pay for all those smashed lighting fixtures.
That's really amazing. So the trick or treat you explained was a way where kids went from house to house and everybody at one house gave them something. Okay, so let's talk about trick or treat. So you're going to have these trick or treaters come to your house. What do you think would be the best thing to give them?
Well, I chocolate, everyone loves chocolate
But a big
and
chocolate bar, or is it a tiny little one, or what do you say about that? We give out, I shouldn't advertise this, but we give out the big bars. We're not, and I got some friends, they're so cheap. They're like, what did you call them, Jack? What was the cheap guy?
oh, Stingy Jack.
Stingy Jack. They're like Stingy Jack. They give out these tiny little things. And I yell at them about it. Come on, can't you just get some darn decent candy for these kids? So it's chocolate, right? What else?
I like to personally split the difference. I buy the small fun-sized bars, but I'll give the kids a couple. And so that way it's like maybe they get two different ones. They always are going to get one they like that way. The biggest candy for years now at Halloween has been Reese's Pieces. Everyone loves those, and of course M&Ms and Snickers and um the little sweet tarts, are fun and
Candy pills.
candy pills. I don't know about that one so much.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that's really interesting is I don't know if they still do it, but I know that I did it, and I think we still do it, is you get home and you sort your candy and you count your candy. Am I right?
Yeah, totally. And then you try to keep your parents from eating it.
Or does that happen everywhere? Are kids always sorting and is that like it's just part of Halloween? Is that right?
think so. It certainly was for me and everybody. All of my friends did it.
That's interesting. So you mentioned something earlier about community. Um, why did you say that? Why do you think Halloween is about community?
Well, one of the things about Christmas, I feel this way, and I know a lot of people do, is it has become very stressful. It's anxious, it's stressful. Everywhere you go is packed, and you have to deal with crowds, and you have to hope you've bought the right gift for someone, and maybe you have to go to a party where you have to prepare the right dish. And Halloween is much more sort of chill. A neighborhood might get together and just all carve pumpkins and plan on what they're going to give the kids for
A little bit
candy.
like Thanksgiving, though, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean, there's not a lot of expectations around Thanksgiving other than turkey and stuffing and dressing and mashed potatoes and sweet. But that one is that holiday doesn't have so many expectations, right? Thanksgiving and Halloween, and now with Thanksgiving, of course, you still have to prepare, right? You have to prepare who's going to make the turkey, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. But with Halloween, there's not a whole lot of that, right?
there's not, and there's also the party element of Halloween. You may
Yeah.
be going to some parties with your friends. You may be going to a haunted attraction with your friends. So you're doing a lot of extra fun things that maybe take you out of your own house.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, this is really interesting, but I want to go back. So I am now on Prince Caspian, which is book number 4 of the 7 books of Narnia. And you think about Narnia, you think about Harry Potter, you think of that, but Narnia in particular, uh, it's just amazing series, isn't it?
It
Have you read it?
is.
Have you read it?
Long ago, I should revisit it.
What's funny, Lisa, is somebody suggested that I read it, and because it does have a lot of spiritual elements in it, particularly Aslan the lion, and C.S. Lewis, who is known, by the way, as Jack, apparently to his friends. When you read this, it's just unbelievable. But what are these people? They just we talked about Edgar Allan Poe. We could talk about the lady behind Harry Potter. When you read Narnia, are they just a different type? Where does this come from? This wild fiction that's also connected to reality.
Well, one of the interesting things about C.S. Lewis, who wrote a lot of different kinds of things, he also wrote nonfiction books about his spirituality and his
Right?
beliefs. But he was part of a small group of writers in England that included J.R.R. Tolkien, who, of course,
Yep,
created The Lord of the Rings. And
that's right.
so I think sharing ideas among
They were
writers.
best friends, by the way. They hung out at the
Right.
same bar, apparently. And I mean,
Yes.
can you imagine being there with Tolkien and C.S. Lewis? And by the way, Dick Lugar, who used to be the senator from Indiana, actually took a course from C.S. Lewis. How many giants are walking with us today that we just kind of don't think about? But those people, wow, huh?
For sure. Yeah, they are the titans. And
You,
I think one of the important things for writers, I know it is true for me, is that you do have friends, you have writer friends, and you get together and you exchange ideas, and that helps you sort of refine and build on your own ideas. And that is so important. One of the things I'm always urging new writers to do is be sure to join writing groups. Get out there and seek out other writers, and you'll be surprised probably at how welcoming they are.
Yeah, and I think that at least when we talk about those two great ones from the past, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, they probably push each other a little bit to a higher and higher level, don't you think? That's my
Sure.
sense.
Yeah, friendly competition. I'm sure there was definitely some of that.
Exactly. Well, there are going to be people who see this who are going to say, "I didn't know any of that," and it's great. How are you going to continue to be the expert on Halloween? What's your goal?
Yeah, it's just one of the things that I write about. I write about paranormal history. I am currently working on a book that's a history of demonic possession. So That's pretty wild and strange, and I love talking about Halloween, though. I plan to keep talking about it every year, and I don't know if I'll write more books about it or not, maybe, but there's always exciting new things to write about.
Well, it's great. I really appreciate very much you taking the time. And I think this is going to be a very, very popular session on this Substack of mine. And we appreciate it very much. And happy Halloween.
Thank you, Governor, and I am so happy to have been on your show. Thank you for inviting me, and happy Halloween to
All
you.
right.